Rutgers, Washington, Friday Night Lights. Time for some keys to the game.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back in to another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's site editor with Athlon Sports Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen today, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Lars, it's time for our favorite show of the week. We got bold predictions, your score prediction. We got defensive keys. We got offensive keys. It's always fun. We love doing these shows. We're starting on the offensive side of the ball, as we always do. So what is your biggest key to the game as Washington travels to Rutgers for a Friday Night Lights showdown?
So I know it's a broken record, and it's something we've talked about all week, but we'd be remiss if we didn't say run the ball. Just establish the run, really get the offense going, get Jonah the ball, whether it's Cam, Jonah, Adam, whoever. It really should be Jonah, and it probably will be, but whoever ends up being the guy that gets him going, commit to the run, allow Will to end up being able to use the play action pass off that, and then you open up your offense. That's the key. Rutgers defense is good, but you look at their third down conversions, you look at some of the red zone stuff, they're gettable, but it starts with establishing the run so you actually have a threat of something else other than the run.
Yeah, so that's what mine is too. It's establishing the run. You know, we talked about where Rutgers ranks in terms of rushing yards allowed per game. They're 90th in the country at 161 yards per game. So as you said, Lars, good, well-coached defense, but also gettable. And that's one of the things that I feel we haven't necessarily seen from Washington's offense so far this season is they've been good. They've been really good in spurts, but they haven't ever necessarily what's the term I'm looking for here? Capitalized. They haven't capitalized. They've been solid. They're making lots of plays, but they're not always doing that, especially inside the red zone, which is infuriating to watch at times.
It really is. But at the same point, when you think about what makes Washington's offense go, everything starts with, it's that old the pro style, right? We want to run to set up the pass, but not truly use the run to set up the pass because Will can do it on his own. Which leads me to my other key here. Once you get the run game going, allow Will to cook. Get Jared, and when I say allow Will to cook, get the ball to as many options as possible. I don't care if you have if Denzel has 5 receptions and you have 5, 4, 3, 2, 2, 2. You have a bunch of guys getting involved because I think that's what it's going to take. When you look at Rutgers' pass defense, again, they haven't really played anybody of significance. In terms of Howard, you got then Virginia Tech. But again, they haven't allowed over 200 yards passing. I think the highest is 151. Yeah, nailed it. Against Akron, not even Virginia Tech. So that tells you it's a good defense. But if you can break that will and extend drives with the run game, then you can take those deep shots. This is a game where if we're talking about Washington traveling, emerging on the Big Ten stage, really asserting themselves on Friday Night Lights, Jeremiah Hunter and Jonah Coleman need to be the two guys getting involved. And that's no slight to Denzel. Denzel can still cook and do all that. But the new guys, the guys that one that we're waiting to see and one that we already know what we're going to see, really should be the focal points here.
So I like where you're going with that. It's somewhat similar to what mine is because, I want to see a lot from Will. But I think it all comes off of something we've talked about all week long. That's establishing play action. Where I really want to see that where when it's worked, it is, when they really have employed it, it's worked pretty well. I've enjoyed what I've seen from Washington's play action game so far this season. And I think this is the perfect opportunity to do that. Draw in the defense. You'll have some nice opportunities in one-on-one coverage and just find a way to exploit it, really, because you have receivers that can go win, even against some talented corners, where Rutgers has some talented corners. But I think that Washington's receivers can find a way to win in one-on-one coverage. And especially if, you're doing this from second and short, third and manageable kind of situations, there are ways you can make this work for the Husky offense. And I like getting Jeremiah Hunter involved. I'd like to see a big day from Keleki Latu, where I want to find a way to put some stress on these Rutgers linebackers if possible, because they're a really solid, well-coached group, as you can say about every group on this team. I know that's something we've said all week. But just the more I look at it, the more I say, all right, if you can utilize one of these tight ends, whether it is Keleki, whether it is Decker DeGraff, to, take one of these linebackers out of the play, all of a sudden that's going to open up more holes for you in the run game as well. Whether it be, Jonah or Cam Davis, Adam Mohammed, whoever it is you want to say. But all of that is going to perfectly intertwine together. And I think finding a way to establish play action and utilizing those guys is a great way to do it.
Absolutely. Well, I think the one thing that it does is it allows so many other guys to get involved. You can use a number of different guys, whether you're talking about the tight ends or Giles Jackson in the slot, where Giles has been a guy, especially when they do that boot to the right, he's often been the one as that target underneath going out. And again, we talked about him for the first 3 weeks of the season. And then, he had, I think it was 1 or 2, 3 catches, something like that. Didn't have as productive as the day against Northwestern, but that was just kind of the way the game dictated. Denzel goes off. There's so many weapons in this offense. And I think that's why, when you talk about Decker, you talk about Keleki, or you talk about Jeremiah, we've seen it from Decker. We've kind of seen it, not really from Keleki because he hasn't gotten a touchdown yet. But I think both of those guys, because I feel like scoring, this is going to be a teaser for my third segment, touchdowns are going to be hard to come by. I feel like this just seems like I have a hard time seeing this become a shootout or a high-scoring affair in any way, shape, or form. Not saying it's going to be like Iowa 10-7, but I think, when you might have a lot of yardage, but that's when those red zone conversions and are you settling for 3? Are you trying to push it? That's what's going to be the difference in the game. And you have Jeremiah, who's 6'2", 6'3", Keleki, who's 6'7". There's so many options in the red zone that we haven't seen yet, but we saw throughout fall camp, and we mentioned it on the show. This is again, the further you get into Big Ten schedule, the less excuse you have to not use more of the playbook. I understand if you wanted to play conservative for the first couple of games, especially against Eastern and Weber State, to a degree Washington State. But now it's like, okay, you passed Northwestern, the easiest test. Now you got a little bit bigger test in Rutgers, especially at Rutgers in Piscataway. There's enough there to say, okay, if Will can find those shots, if Jed can call the right plays, and I think kind of should be the first and third key here, play calling. Like, if he's off into your play action point, there's some times where it seems like Jed is outsmarted himself, as it were. And I'm not just talking about the fourth down against Wazoo. There's been plenty of other times in games throughout the season where it's Jed, you can kind of see what he's driving at, but it's like, right thought, wrong time. I think the more Jed starts to get into it, I think he will start to get a better feel for how Will and this offense really kind of jives and gets in rhythm. And we'll start to see that against Rutgers.
No, I like that. I agree with that, where the one thing that I really want to see on that note is how much have you not shown yet? Because as you said, there are a lot of things, especially down in the red zone, that they displayed throughout spring ball and fall camp, really, where it's okay, when is this going to show up? When is that going to show up? And it feels like you might want to save it for a game like this, where it's all right, we know this is how they want to attack us defensively. So yeah, we can, put in some different calls this week and do something a little bit different. But it's almost like, all right, maybe you wanted to put some of that stuff on film a little bit earlier so you can set up counter looks off of that too. And maybe this is the kind of game for that. And then, you look at the defense you got to go against next week in Michigan. Maybe we'll see a little bit more of that, but I don't know, because I really like that point. And the more I think about it, the more I look at it, it's just, okay, yeah, this could be a really nice week for Jed to show up and show off. Yeah, no, don't worry about the play call a few weeks ago. I still have things like this in my bag that I can go to whenever I want to, and I can make sure that I utilize them effectively. And this could be a really nice game for that. And I think especially on the ground with some of the things we saw, where one play that I think about a lot is the veer they had to Adam Mohammed, where it turned into a really nice run a couple weeks ago against Wazoo, where I look at plays like that and think, all right, I don't know how many of those are in the playbook, but there are certainly a lot of things you can do off of that. And I'm really curious to see what that looks like. And Lars, that being said, let's flip sides here. Let's get over to the defense. Right after a message from our friends over at Robinhood. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.5% APY on uninvested cash, receive unlimited 1% deposit bonuses, and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risks. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. So, Lars, let's look at the other side of the ball here. Let's look at the defense. And what's the number one thing you see? Because I'm really intrigued at what Washington's defense can do against this Rutgers offense. Because obviously, the number one key here is stopping Kyle Monangai.
Right. Well, I was going to say, to feed off of that, force Rutgers to pass, because when you look at their pass game, that's the weakness. That is absolutely their weakness. So again, one leads into the other. We're both going to end up talking about it. But the other thing about that is if you can even just force them into 3rd and longs, where if you're talking 3rd and 7, where you actually have to either force a decision out of Greg Schiano and say, do you really want to run on 3rd and 7? Do you want to try and get creative, or are you going to be willing to pass? That's because if you're talking about 3rd and 3, 3rd and 2, you're just gift wrapping it to Kyle Monangai. Like, there's no way if you're Rutgers that you're not going to, on 3rd and 3 from the, let's say, 35 on either side of the field, not run the ball.
Sure.
There's no way that's not in the play call. Like, so to me, yeah, the obvious one is stop Kyle Monangai and slow Kyle Monangai, because really you're not going to stop him, you're going to slow him. But it's more about how can you do it, and I think that's why it's kind of forcing him more into passing situations by starting with, down and distance on 2nd down and 3rd down.
Sure. So I actually think that one person that is going to come into play a lot this weekend is Friday. It's still weird. Is Kamori House, where I think that this could be another really big Kamori House game. He's been awesome the last couple of weeks. Obviously won Big Ten Freshman of the Week for his performance against Northwestern. And when I watch him, I don't necessarily know that, he's necessarily big and physical enough to tackle Kyle Monangai one-on-one every single time. But I don't think he needs to be. Where Rutgers, they like to run the read option a little bit, not a whole ton. But when I look at this rushing attack, it really is just finding a way to contain him. Samuel Brown is also really good, but he's got 28 rushing attempts to Kyle Monangai's 72. So it's like, yeah, there are two really talented backs back there, but one guy is taking the majority of the carries. So when I look at this, I say, all right, let's see a little bit more from Kamori House. Let's see more three linebacker sets. I think we're going to see a traditional 4-3 look a lot of the times here, where it's going to look different than that, but that's just gonna be the personnel package that's out there, where we're going to see 3 linebackers. It'll be Kamori, Carson, Bruener, and Alfonso Tupatala, and they'll walk a Cameron Fabiculon or a Cameron Broussard down into the box. And we're going to see some really big fronts daring Rutgers to throw the ball. And I don't think they're going to. I think they're going to say, no, we love our workhorse who has done an awesome job for us this season. We're going to put our biggest strength out there. And I think Washington it's not stopping him, as we said, it's containing him. It's finding a way to contain him and limit him, where if you can get him on the ground, 3-4 yards on 1st, 2nd down, like that'd be nice, but finding a way just on one of those plays to limit the damage and get them into a 3rd and 6 or a 3rd and 7 and just say, all right, yeah, like you can run the ball. Like that's fine. We prefer for you to do that at this point, because if you throw it, we dare you to do that. We want to take advantage of that.
See, what's interesting about that? Because as you were saying that, I was looking into some numbers, because you make all those were great points, but it ironically actually feeds into your offensive first point. What would you do if I told you that Rutgers quarterback ranks 20th in the country at 16 point? It doesn't sound great. 16.6 completion percentage off play action pass. That's 20th in the country. And Will Rogers is not 19 and above. So that tells you, because the running backs are so effective, when they do go to play action and when they do end up throwing it off, that they are having some relative success. Again, 16% doesn't sound great.
So sorry, because our guy Alex Katzen, who writes with me over at Huskies Wire, put out a fantastic scouting piece for Northwestern, and he talked a lot about this, where it's very efficient looks, where it's slip screens, it's flat routes, it's a lot of very easy completions. So yes, you're right that he is operating at a high level of efficiency, because what they're doing is they're running that off the read option look, where they're saying, all right, we're just going to pull it and we're going to dump it down right here, where there were only 3 receivers that caught a pass for Rutgers in their last game, where it all, plays off the run game, but it's short, efficient looks where it's, we're going to dump it off right here. This guy's uncovered and we're going to have him pick up 6, 7, 8 yards. It's efficient. It works. But I think that if anybody knows what that look is going to, how to expose that look and how to defend it properly, I think it's Steve Belichick and this defensive staff, where I think they could do a really good job with that. But that's one of the reasons that he's been so efficient, is because this opposing defenses get so drawn in and get so focused on stopping the run that it's easy enough for somebody to slip out. And that's why if you bring one of these safeties down in the box, it might negate that. If it's just, okay, we know they want to do this with the tight end, we're just going to leave him there. We're going to leave the safety over there and try to find a way to make that work.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the other side of that equation is it also means everybody outside has to win their one-on-ones. Now, again, you look at Rutgers receivers, as we talked about on Thursday's show, and it's like, they don't necessarily scare you. But again, you'd be kind of remiss if you take that for granted. Like I said, I didn't think highly of Northwestern's receivers. I didn't think they'd drop as many passes as they did. You can't necessarily bank on that every week. And when you go back and look at that Northwestern game, those were actually should have been mostly catches. Like all those drops weren't like, oh, hey, you heard the feet coming, or like there was a number of plays where Washington wasn't necessarily close to the ball. They were close enough that they would have made a tackle, wouldn't have been a huge yak, but they still would have been completions. You can't bank on drops, obviously you'll take them. But I think that really also stresses the importance of winning those one-on-one outsides, because when they rarely do it, like that's the thing, they don't do it often, but when they do, those are going to be those plays where, a la, the 3rd and 20, the jailbreak, where it's, hey, like those are going to be those game-changing type of plays, because there's not going to be a ton of them in the game. There's going to be a very narrow margin game, as we'll get to in the third segment. Because of that and many other reasons, you have to win those one-on-ones outside.
So I agree with you there. I think that part of that was some of that advanced scouting, where it's, all right, we're not necessarily super impressed with these receivers. If we force him to make this kind of throw, he hasn't shown the ability to, do it reliably. I think that a little bit of that played into it. It doesn't excuse the drops. Not at all, because you're right. But I think that played into it a little bit. And I think we might see a little bit of, just some extra aggression there, where I referenced the Washington State game because it's the same thing where we saw them. All right, we're going to give you everything underneath. If you want to just, sit at 5 yards, we're going to let you complete those passes. And it was efficient. It worked sometimes, but John Mateer still only completed 50% of his passes. So there's something to be said for, we're going to allow you to have this sort of thing where this Rutgers offense doesn't take a lot of shots. And I think if you just find a way to keep things contained underneath, it could end up working. I just really, it all comes back to, though, finding a way to get into those situations where Washington is, and a big part of that is pressuring the quarterback and just pressuring the offensive line in general. Washington is one of the better teams in the country when it comes to pressure rate. They're pressuring quarterbacks about 40% of their dropbacks. So they're doing a really good job of getting after the quarterback, no matter what the look is, if it's a blitz, just whatever the call is. So finding a way to do that and utilize that penetration in the run game to find a way to just to play that off into pressure in the pass game. Because we know what's coming on those 3rd and longs with that, that zero down lineman look with either Voy or Deshaun Lynch playing that zero technique and a stand-up. So finding a way to get to that is going to be really helpful. I'm just curious how much of that we're going to see against this offensive line as well.
No, but I think it feeds into your point of Washington can bring pressure from many different angles and many different levels. And I think that's the mix. That's the key here, because as I mentioned, I think earlier this week, where you have Alfonso Chiapachal and Voy both at 11 pressures to lead the team. So you're talking about two completely different players in that regard. And that doesn't negate also Zach Durfee, who's coming back from injury, or expected to come back from injury. Yeah, Carson, who probably will be more healthy than he was against Northwestern for sure. And I think all those guys played. It can be any one of them. And it can be Kamori, as you mentioned. Like Kamori's another guy where I can easily see him coming off the edge of that 5th guy as well. And that to me is why this defense, why we view this defense so highly and why I'm confident going into this game. But also, as I said, it is gettable. So it's going to be important that when they do pressure, that they get home and that they don't get burned. Because if you end up emptying the house, not totally, but you know what I mean? Like if you end up bringing pressure and get beat, those are going to be, just like I said, those plays that you can't afford to have, the 3rd and 20, whatever you want to call it, because this margin for error is so thin.
But we saw that last week, where on some of those 3rd and longs, that cover zero look wasn't nearly as prevalent, which is a good sign. And that shows exactly one of the things we like about this coaching staff is that the adjustments were made. So I don't necessarily think that that's something that we're going to see, but I'm just curious what this game plan is going to be, because look, at the end of the day, with what this offense is, it comes down to how many players are going to put in the box. What are the coverages going to be off of that when they actually do decide to drop back and pass? That's going to decide the game, in my opinion, is how are you going to play off of that look when they do decide to drop back? Because if you can find a way to contain Kyle Monangai and limit him in any capacity, if you win the battle of your secondary versus these Rutgers receivers, I think that's a fantastic sign for this game. And Lars, that being said, let's get into our predictions. Right after a message from our friends over at FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. And I got a fun one for you. I got to go back to this MVP will, because talked about it a little bit earlier in the week. Watching Josh Allen just dismantle the Buffalo Bills, the Jacksonville Jaguars secondary, that is. They had a fantastic first half, 250 yards, 4 touchdowns. I've just been so impressed with him early on in the season. And, I still think he's got to overcome whenever they play the New York Jets. I know they always give him a lot of trouble on the defensive side there, but he's shown that he's been really efficient so far. He's protected the football, which is big for him. And if he can continue to do that, I think with the way some of the other quarterbacks has played, he should be the runaway favorite for MVP. And you should go check out his odds over on FanDuel. So Lars, bold prediction time here. And in traditional Locked On Huskies fashion, I have forgotten who's supposed to go first. I think it's your turn. So either way, I'm just going to pass it over to you.
Lovely. Okay. So yeah, I honestly couldn't tell you either. I do, actually, I think that tracks. I think that tracks actually.
Yeah.
But, I remember, I think last week I go for it. So, but yeah, checks out. So first key, starting off the bat here, or not first key, first prediction is how we say. Will Rogers goes over 200, the first quarterback this season to throw for over 200 against Rutgers. Give me 23 of 28.
Okay.
No. 23-28 for
all right,
215 and 1 touchdown.
Okay. So I like this because Will has been efficient. The 28 pass attempts has been very consistent throughout the first couple of weeks. And when I look at this, I like that a lot because that plays off into what I wanted to go with here, because I wanted to talk about Jonah Coleman, where I wrote about him a little bit this week earlier on Huskies Wire, just talking about some of his numbers on the road. 168 all-purpose yards and 3 touchdowns at Washington State. Obviously had his big breakout game against USC with 140-something on the ground, and also ran for nearly 180 at Colorado all last season on the road, because as he told us, he loves playing on the road. So give me 120 yards on the ground and 2 touchdowns. I think that this could be a big Jonah Coleman game. I'm going to double down on this a little bit, where I think we see him have the most carries of his career in this game, which, I think is like 18 plus. So it's not necessarily a massive number, but I think with the way that Jed is going to want to attack this Rutgers run defense, Jonah's going to have a crucial role in this offense.
So I'm glad you said that, 2 touchdowns, because for reference, career high is 22 for 143 against USC last season. So without question, you're in the ballpark. I think I could see certainly the yardage in that respect. And I'm glad you said the 2 touchdowns, because that's going to end up perfect when I wrap this thing up here at the end. But I think I'll double down on that. I will also say I'll double down on the running back side of it. I think Adam Mohammed, if Jonah doesn't get 2, Adam Mohammed will get his first rushing touchdown. I don't think Adam Mohammed's going to play a ton, but I'm going to try this one more time, because I love Damon, but I don't think Jed's pulling that one out in this game. You might see Damon. I'm not saying Damon won't play. I'm not saying Damon won't play, but I'm saying in terms of touchdown, which one is the safer bet? I think, this is going to be a game where Scotty Graham looks back and says, hey, Adam Mohammed got his first career rushing touchdown at Rutgers in a road game, like in a game that maybe is a significant win.
So I'm adding one here where I don't have this written down. This is just going off of what you said, because I disagree with one thing you said there. I think we see Damon Williams in a goal to go situation in this game where maybe it's 2 quarterback set. Maybe they bring him in to run QB power, run a read option, whatever it is. I think that that's something that Jed has wanted to show and just hasn't necessarily had the opportunity. So what better time than against your biggest opponent so far, nationally televised game? I think this is the time that you show that, especially with, considering who you're playing next week. So I think that's something he'll want to get on film. So I'm adding that to the bag. I'm not saying he's going to score. I'm just saying that in a goal to go situation, we will see Damon Williams in there. So with that being said, I'm going to move to my second bold prediction. And I'm glad you mentioned this earlier on in the show, because this is something I've wanted to go with for a while and the time feels right. We have seen touchdowns from tight ends this year. Decker DeGraff has been awesome. There's no other way to put it. Decker DeGraff has been awesome. Give me Keleki Latu, anytime touchdown. I think this is the week we see it. I think we're going to see him utilized on one of those fade routes because no matter who it is, and this isn't, a shot at the Rutgers defense or any other defense, he's just nearly impossible to cover just near the goal line. He's just that big, that physical. I think we see him get in the end zone for the first time in his Husky career this Friday.
I like that. I mean, this game is going to have a first for somebody. This game screams a first for somebody, whether it's Damon, whether it's Adam, it's somebody, which also then leads me to my defensive one. I think, how do I put this? Broussard forces his first turnover.
Ooh, I like this. This is a fun one.
So it's not, I'm not saying interception. I'm saying in some manner of the two. Because one thing is going to have to be dependence game. Washington is going to have to force a change of field. Sure. That's going to have to come in turn. Unless you want to do a special teams block and really shock all of us, which I'm not going to go that bold today. I would love to see that, but I'm not that bold. So give me that, because to me, it really all feeds into all of this, where if Cam can have a coming out party, Jonah has a coming out party of sorts in terms on the national stage, right? This is an East Coast game. So now you have to show out your East Coast audience. Broussard has been one of the more consistent guys on this defense. And I think this could be his best game as a Husky so far.
I like that. I think that's fun. So that kind of parlays perfectly, because we have been so far off on our bold. This is why they're bold predictions on total tackles. I think I've got the best one yet so far. Give me Carson Bruener. Oh, this is, I want to change the number that I have written down here, but I'm not going to. Because of what Rutgers offense is, Carson Bruener gets double-digit tackles this week. I say he leads the team. I'm not going to give you an exact number, but I think it's going to be over 10, because I think just the way that Rutgers is going to want to run this offense, we're going to see Carson Bruener versus Kyle Monangai in the hole at least 3 or 4 times in this game. And no matter who wins, that's going to be a really fun battle to watch. But I think no matter what, Carson is going to at least get a couple assists on some tackles there. So give me Carson Bruener being the first Husky to get into double-digit tackles this season.
See, I always think that's going to happen. I just wonder if this defense, in a way, like this defense perfectly suits a guy to have 12, 13 tackles, but also suits 5 guys to have 4 tackles.
Right. So I agree with that. And that's why we've been wrong, is because of that. And that's why I kind of hesitated here. But at the same point, the way this Rutgers offense likes to run the ball, I just think that it's going to fall even more so on, as I said, I think we see a lot of just 3 linebacker sets on those 3 linebackers. And just with Carson being who he is and playing the way he has this season, because he is the team's leading tackler, I just think this is going to be a really big game for him.
I agree. And that's going to parlay into my last pretty bold prediction. I think Washington holds Kyle Monangai under 100 yards. Give me 16 or 17 carries, one of the two.
Oh, sorry.
95 yards.
Okay.
And I do think he will get a touchdown, but I don't think that's the worst thing in the world if that's his final stat line and he has 1 touchdown.
I've got one. Okay, I've got one more for you. I think this is a Locked On Huskies first here, where especially after what we saw last week, I think Grady Gross kicks his first 50-plus yard field goal on Friday. I got a feeling they let him try it last week. He made it before the icing. I know it doesn't count, but we saw him look good on that one. He had plenty of leg on the second one, just push it a little bit. I think he rights the ship this week and makes a 50-plus yarder. So with that being said, Lars, it is time for your score prediction.
And let the record show I nailed Washington's score on the last week. Didn't get Northwestern's correct, not even close, but 24 in Washington is all that matters. Exactly. So I'm as I said, I'm not going against. I'm taking the under, first of all, as I told you before the show. And the over-under, I believe, is 44.5. Yeah,
okay.
44.5.
Shout out to our friends at FanDuel.
Yep, spreads 2.5 in favor of Rutgers. Washington covers.
Okay.
Give me Washington 24, Rutgers 20. And the only reason I say 24, I was going to say 21-20, but you threw Grady Gross getting a field goal in there, so I threw that one in there for the extra 3.
Respect. I like that a lot. And Lars, this has been a blast. We love doing these sort of shows. As always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all the everydayers tuning in. And thank you for making Locked On Huskies your first listen today. Now, for your second listen, find Locked On College Football from NIL deals, never-ending conference realignment rumors. Our guy, Spencer McLaughlin, gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron. Find Locked On College Football on YouTube, where else you listen to your podcast. It's also down in the description below. So make sure you go check that out. We love our guy, Spencer. I know I made an appearance on the Thursday show. Yeah, we had a lot of fun with that as well. So make sure you go check that out. And as always, if you like what we have to offer, make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. Get any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you after the game.